Well, good day, folks. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Today's going to be a little less political and more about honoring people that served this country, specifically veterans. I have somebody on today that he served. He served during Vietnam. He was a combat medic. And we're here to talk about an event that honors veterans. Welcome, John Cline.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting us.
Oh, glad to. You know, I really think that veterans exemplify patriotism, love of country. You didn't do it for the pay.
Absolutely not on that. Our love of country, I think, stems from the camaraderie that we all exhibited. And by working together as a team over there, we continue to work together and serve our country. And the patriotism, this country is something that people tell me when I'm out and they thank me for my service. I turn around and I say, you were worth it and the country was worth it.
You know, that idea of service and that there's something larger than yourself. In a lot of places, it feels like it's forgotten. That there's a lot of people that think, well, I can't be patriotic because this isn't a good country. And I would point out that every country has flaws and warts and blood on their hands. You might not always like the government that's there, but the set of ideals that our forefathers set down in the Constitution that allowed for freedom and opportunity, how can you not like that?
And not only our forefathers, I think I told you before, my veterans go back to the American Revolution. My family has fought in every one of the wars all the way through, and continuing on with my sons who were in Iraq and Afghanistan. So the country and working with the country the way that we do is so important. This country is worth it, whether you appreciate the current or former political aspects of it.
Or neither.
Or neither, absolutely. But if we still continue to work together and remember those goals, all of our freedoms are there because of veterans, people who have chosen to support this country, to give everybody those rights that they now have.
Now, we'll come back to the event, but I want to go ahead and give the times for the event so people get it in their head. Repeating it sometimes is necessary. So, March 29th.
March 29th, which is the Saturday following this one, and it will be at Clovis Veterans Memorial District. The doors open at 10 o'clock. The event starts at 10:30, and it will continue on after we have the speakers and a couple of very special things. We have a special treat on a original song that was written for the veterans for their support. And then there will be a light lunch and everything, and exhibits, and a big old 30 by 50 foot flag that you can go ahead and sign your name as to where that you served during that period.
Well, that's pretty cool. So that is March 29th from 10 to 1. Now, I want to point out, not all of my listeners are in this area, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other Vietnam veteran events, and this one's a big one. So can you tell us why this is a big one?
The March 29th event that we're having this year is actually the 50th year since the end of the Vietnam War. It was officially over in 1975. So this is 50 years. It's hard to believe. I was 19 when I was over there back in 1969. But this is the big event culminating the end of the war.
So at this point, what is the oldest Vietnam vet and the youngest Vietnam vet approximately? Do you know?
Oh, gosh. Well, we had people who were senior NCOs at the time that they were serving over there, and they're into their 90s. Probably the youngest one, since it was over in 1975, they would have to have been about 70 years old. Probably is around the youngest now.
So we're running out of time to right or wrong. Now, I say that because while I was not really old enough to remember very much of that, in 1975, I was 6 years old. But I still remember seeing on the news how soldiers were spit at. How when my dad came back, he talked about that. Now, he came back a little before 75. Really, they didn't get the welcome they deserved because they were following orders. Just because you didn't like the government, the idea that we took it out on the soldiers just doesn't seem right. So I think that it would be really a great thing to show your support, to make it clear that, no, they were heroes.
And this is what I'm with the Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 933, and our title of what we're doing this particular event is Homecoming and Continuing to Serve. When we came back, I didn't even find out many of the veterans that I worked with. I worked for the state for 34 years. And until I read their obituary, I didn't even know they were in Vietnam because we didn't talk about it. It was something that you came home to. The divisiveness of this country was incredible at that time. We were just following our orders and trying to stay alive. But when we came back, I came back to Fort Lewis, Washington, and there was a flag at the end of a long hallway with a light on it, and it said, "Welcome home, America is proud of you." From there, I went to San Francisco Airport.
Ooh.
That was not a good thing. You talk about people getting spit on and everything else. We were required to be in uniform at that time. Later on, they said that wasn't a good idea because of the welcome home that we got, which my welcome home, there was a birthday party for an 8-year-old girl, and she had on the door, "Welcome home, John." Brings tears to my eyes even now. That was my welcome home, and that was worth it. The country was worth it, but we just blended into society doing different jobs, whether it was truck driving or politics or, in my case, I worked with consumer fraud for about 34 years. But we blended in. They didn't even know that we had served. We didn't know that other people had served because it wasn't something you talked about. It was almost a stigma that we carried. But now we are continuing to serve and bringing to the country, where we will never again let any of the soldiers be treated the way that we were.
Well, let's hope that is actually the case. But
And
we're always one generation from losing freedom. If we don't raise the next generation to be patriotic and to believe in the ideals of this country, they won't defend it.
Absolutely, and we see that a lot. So we try to get into the schools, whether it be through Boy Scouts or some of the different grades and everything, and teach them this patriotism and how important it is to love your country and serve it in some way. The things that you are able to do in life are because of the veterans, but if you don't continue it on, it's as you say, we're only one generation away from ever losing those freedoms.
I find that veterans serve, meaning they have something that they believe betters the community at a higher percentage than the rest of the population. That something about going through that process and defending the country makes you more patriotic, more likely to serve. Am I right?
I think that's true in many cases. Some of them just blended off into the Netherlands, and because they didn't want anybody to know. They didn't know what was happening. But I think now, I haven't seen it quite as much in the younger group, but our group from Vietnam, we feel it's so important, and we try to get involved in all community events and, bring the community together, bring the patriotism back, things that are not taught in school that are so important to this country and our young. And I work a lot of times with the youngsters and read some of the essays and things that are written. I know our Daughters of the American Revolution have the Citizenship Award, and I have been fortunate enough to grade a lot of those, and it's amazing, some of these people. And it's really incredible to see the quality of some of our youngsters that are coming up, and to bring this out, and it does my heart well to see that in our younger generation.
So if somebody had a group of kids, a Boy Scout troop, Turning Point group, any number of youth groups, they're welcome at this event?
Anybody is welcome. We would encourage that. Anytime we have an event, we try to get the school districts involved. Clovis School District is very good in their inroads and everything that are coming up for the different events and everything.
Now, is that just ROTC, or is that the school in general?
The school in general. The younger the kids, the better. Teach them this is what patriotism is. This is what we did. We have, they're welcome to the events, and we'd love to have anybody come. And that's true from, you don't have to be in the Clovis area or the Fresno area, anywhere around. Come down and see an event and honor our Vietnam veterans.
Now, you mentioned lunch. What's lunch cost?
Lunch is free.
Huh, so you could come down, be patriotic, and get free lunch?
Absolutely. And this is something that we find is so important. And again, we have different, the VA hospital is going to be down there. There are going to be outreach programs from the different portions of that. We have different tables that are available for people, but the interactions with our veterans and everything, and to help them out as well.
Well, Clovis is truly blessed in that we have a really, I don't know if we'd call it world-class, but at least very high-class facility.
I think it's more than high class. That it is becoming known throughout the nation. We have so many different events there, and they support their veterans, and they want to continue that support. It's so important. And bringing in the school districts, and they have a heritage center there now, which brings in the younger people, and you can go through, and it's like a museum. It's almost like a live museum that you can come and walk through.
See, that part I didn't know, even though I know Don quite well.
Yeah.
So he's on the board.
Don is a friend of mine.
Yeah. And I know Lorenzo reasonably well, and I've used the facility for events I've put on or helped put on, as well as been to many other people's events. We're truly blessed. Now, even if you're not in Clovis, we'd be okay if you drove over, if you were relatively close to Central California. I think that we're blessed that this is a patriotic hub. You know that there's some argument, but we either have the largest or the second largest Veterans Day parade in the country. Now, again, I don't know who's right. I tend to believe our people, and I want to say that we are, but I know that there are people arguing on the other side of the Mississippi that are saying they have a larger one. The fact that we're even in the talk is something to be proud of.
Our Veterans Day parade is pretty amazing. I have friends who are on that board. I work with so many different veterans events and everything around, but that is something that has brought together the country. And I like to believe that it is the largest. I've heard that, and I'm going to stick with that.
Well, that's like defending your home team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's a big deal. Again, this is March 29th from 10 to 1 at right in Central California, the Clovis Veterans Memorial District building.
And that is just east of Clovis Avenue, and it's between 3rd and 5th Street. Mm-hmm. And you can't hardly miss it. Look for the statues and all the flags.
It has amazing statues, depending on which side you're looking at. Not so much on Bullard, which is it still 5th Street there? It's 5th Street there.
Yes.
But the other two sides that you can see, great statues, flags, it just screams patriotism. And when you step inside, it's also really kind of pretty special. You've got some moving water inside and a memorial inside.
That memorial breaks my heart all the time. I stand outside and read the names of there. And what it is all the different veterans from the Clovis area that have passed in each one of the wars from World War I all the way up through Afghanistan.
Wow. So you served in Vietnam. You said you were a combat medic.
Yes.
So which branch were you with?
Medics are in the Army.
Okay.
Corpsmen are Navy and Marines.
Okay.
But I was a combat medic. I originally started in pre-vet med at Colorado State University, and I had worked for a small animal doctor for during the summers and weekends. But going away to school, I wasn't ready for school, and school really wasn't ready for me at that time. And I was raised that you have an obligation to your country, and I willingly took that obligation and signed up, and I was supposed to be a veterinarian specialist. That's when I got in, and they decided people, animals, pretty much the same. They made me a combat medic, and they sent me over to Vietnam. So I was in the Central Highlands area, in the jungles, from 1969 to 1970, and I was in the field for over 11 months with an infantry unit. So
you saw a lot of things you'd probably rather never see again.
I decided not to go into medicine after I came back. But one of the things from our medics, that what we did over there, every one of the paramedics today, that's where they learned all of the triaging and the things that we did over there. So there's so many good things that came from Vietnam, from the war, things that people don't think about. They only look at one aspect of it. But
so the technology that was developed, essentially, or the practices that were developed, ended up saving lives after Vietnam.
That's continuing today. All of our practices, of course, they've advanced them even more from that point. But what we did, the triaging and the medevacs and everything else, that's today what our EMT and medicine is doing it now.
So you said you were only there for a year. Did you get injured?
Not officially, but yeah, and our injuries are much deeper than what is visible a lot of times. I was subjected to, we used to stand out there when they were spraying the Agent Orange. We didn't know what that was. I have a license plate that says dioxin, and dioxin is Agent Orange. And I actually got Parkinson's from the Agent Orange as well. So our injuries a lot of times are not seen, but I had some other injuries, but I was a medic. I kept going, and I treated my own injuries.
I had two grandpas that served both in World War II. One on the California coast as a Coast Guard, and that's what they asked him to do, so that's what he did. He never actually got called up to combat. He was pretty fortunate. The other one was in the Pacific Theater as a Marine, and he was not an officer till the very end. Thus, he saw a lot of combat. He definitely had scars that he didn't show on the outside. Numerous times he would have, and the only time he would talk about his military services when his buddies were around, but nobody else was allowed to be there. Being the super obedient kid I was, I snuck in regularly. He always caught me eventually and kicked me out, but he always kind of laughed about it because all of his buddies laughed. I was the only grandkid that tried to sneak in. To this day, his sons don't really know what he did in the Pacific Theater. I know a little more than they do just because I snuck in. But it's interesting to me how veterans often won't talk about the tragedy they went through except with other veterans. I think that's why it's so important to have veteran organizations.
And to take that a step further, I actually lead a Veterans Stories of Service class over at Clovis Veterans Memorial District every Monday, and we start at 9 o'clock and we end about 11:30. And we have anywhere from 55 or more veterans. That's been going on for 23 years. And when you talk about veterans only talking around veterans, my wife would love to understand what I did in Vietnam and more than she actually sees from the outside, but there's no way that she can possibly understand without have been there and experiencing it.
So we're going to need to wrap up and take our first break. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. I want to say thank you to everybody that's listening on social media. Please like, subscribe, comment, but the most important one is to share. If you believe in this message and you want to get it out, or you just want to come to the event, hey, share it with friends. Get them to this event. We need to honor veterans. We're going to go ahead and come back. And this is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. I am joined by local veteran leader, that fair?
Absolutely.
John Cline. You are representing today, because you wear many hats, is my understanding, the Vietnam Veterans of America. Welcome.
That is correct. Chapter 933, and I'm here to promote the event that we are having to honor our Vietnam War era veterans, not just the ones that were in country, because it took the entire country, whether you were in CONUS, which is the United States, or serving elsewhere, to support what we did over in Vietnam. And everybody is welcome to this event, which is March 29th. It's Saturday. Doors open at 10. It goes till 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We have speakers. We have a keynote speaker that was former civilian aide to the Secretary of the Army. He's a retired command sergeant major that was also served tours over in Vietnam. And besides that, we have many other events and a free lunch on that. So come on down and join us there, please. Whether you're family, or your friends, or just somebody who's interested, or a younger school group or a scout troop, please come to our event, March 29th, to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the end of the war in Vietnam.
So you regularly work with, as we talked about in the previous segment, veterans, and you have you call it a story hour?
It's called Stories of Service.
Okay, so what do veterans focus on there? Are they talking about their after issues, or are you talking about things they did when they served?
It's all-inclusive on that. It's not a blood and gore type thing, but we talk about, and it depends on what topic I throw out. And sometimes I'll throw something out, and it will end up something that I did not see coming at all. But we may talk about what was your first Christmas in the service, or if you were out in the field, what did you do out there? What duties did you do other than the ones that you were trained for? Did you end up a different job in there? It's a full gambit.
I'm curious, since I've never served, you mentioned first holiday away from family. And not everybody has family that has the means. I know of people that send care packages. How do veterans receive that?
That was one of the greatest things when you were over there. You have a local organization, the Blue Star Moms, and they still are sending out care packages. My wife is actually a Blue Star mom. I have two sons that also served. They have since retired. But to receive a package from home, to receive something that reminds you of what was happening. It's a lot different now than it was during Vietnam, but they still need those packages and that support. And please, if you see a fundraiser or something going for Blue Star Moms of America, the Central Valley Blue Star Moms do a fantastic job supporting our current veterans that are away from home and not able to be with their families.
Well, that's important. We've got a VA hospital here, which makes us a hub in a lot of ways because veterans from all the surrounding areas, there's where your medical care is. What do you think of our local VA hospital?
I hear both sides of the issues on that. I work with voluntary services with the VA hospital. I've worked with some of the past directors, and I hear that we have excellent service at this VA hospital. I hear the other end of it too, that they can't get their appointments, but they are outsourcing a lot more of them now. I had a very good health program, so I do not use the VA hospital myself, but I know very many veterans that do.
Well, it's essential. That's their only option. That
is the only thing that they have. I was very fortunate that I did not have to have that. But the ones that do, I have a daughter-in-law who is a licensed therapist and works for the VA hospital up in Anchorage. So the importance to our veterans and that we care for our veterans, because they are not getting a lot of times the care that they really need, and we're even trying to get a lot of the veterans that are not even associated with that hospital to get in and see what is available for them, because we have a lot of them that haven't even signed up for their care.
How do veterans change when they hang out with each other? What's your experience?
They open up in a lot of ways because we have a camaraderie that is felt with. It's more of a feeling. You can't explain it, but we've all experienced being in the military and being together, being away from home, and being with that group of people, and you feel much more comfortable. You will talk. You will say things that you wouldn't say to other people. You'll tell stories that you don't even tell to your spouses or family or anything else.
So you become part of a community.
You are a community within a community, yes.
Now, I hear a lot of kind of little poking between the various branches of service.
I don't think it's little poking. That goes on, and the challenges between that, you'd love to see that.
Well, if they're laughing and smiling, I'm happy to see it.
Yes.
If they're serious, I don't know, but
usually it does not involve fisticuffs or anything, but the challenges between the different services is very noticeable.
Well, that's always interesting to me, how it's almost like it has to be brought up. It's a point of pride that you have to kind of poke the other guy.
And there's some branches that are push that a little more than others, and that would be the ones that use the crayons all the time, our lovely Marines.
Well, Grandpa was one of the grandpas was a Marine. The other was a Coast Guard. I guarantee he'd have something to say about that. But he was pretty good with crayons.
Yeah.
Stayed inside the lines and everything.
Yeah. And I have a lot of Marine friends, and it's so much fun to poke fun at each other. We enjoy it all the time.
Well, good. What issues do you hear about most? What do veterans feel they need? Do they need to be heard? What's going on with that older generation now? Because even our Afghani vets, they're not kids anymore.
We are also involved with Vietnam Veterans of America. We are politically, we get very involved on making sure that the veterans' issues are addressed. Most recently, probably the biggest one is the PACT Act, and that has to do with the burn pits and other things that were involved. That a lot of our Afghani and the TBIs from all of the IEDs, the brain.
So what is a TBI?
It's a traumatic brain injury.
Okay.
And what that happens a lot of times is with the concussions. They might have been in a vehicle and IED, an explosive went off, and it caused the brain damage that may not show up right away. These things show up a long time later. Like with Agent Orange, there were many things, many of our maladies that we have. They've all occurred mainly in many years since the end of the war. But we get involved politically with that and try to make sure that no veteran was treated the way that we were, and that they are continuing to receive the benefits that they need. And that is the most important thing in as far as involvement and everything.
Do you think that veterans are paid the way they should be?
Paid the way they should be?
Well, when they're in the service. I get there's another deal as to the during and after. You get some benefits after, but let's face it, they don't get paid very much at all.
They don't
for an all volunteer force. It wasn't that way when you went in, but it's now an all volunteer force.
That's correct. And the thing that they need to make sure that they do, because whether they're paid enough now, you turn around and you look at what minimum wage is and what the people do for that, and then you look at our military services and the compensations are nowhere close to where they should be. But you look at the benefits that they do get afterwards, and that is so important. We take a look at that, and the fact that they have the abilities to get the educational opportunities that they do, and many of them do not take that. And we push that, and we help with our Vietnam veterans. We help with the Fresno State's program where they blend the veteran back into the educational platform and get them where they are up to speed and they can start back into school and not drop out like so many of them do, because they've been away from it for so long. They don't even know how to go into the college aspect of it.
Here's something that's always interesting to me. Okay, on the outside, as not a veteran, I've always had, once I was an adult, I had all of my constitutional rights. It's interesting that veterans go in as patriots, but then what happened to your First Amendment right? Was it there? Or your Second Amendment right? It wasn't there. It was all upon the will of your commanding officer as to what you could say and when you could say it, and you didn't get a whole lot of choice of when you could assemble or even petitioning. Your First Amendment rights really changed. You'd still have freedom of religion, but you couldn't exercise it if there was an operation going on.
And that's true, because when you go into the service, GI means general issue. You are part of the United States, and you do exactly as you are told, when you are told, how you are told, and everything else.
Well, but that would make it the soldier's fault. That was the thinking in Vietnam. Except what you just told me is they didn't have a choice, did they?
No, we didn't. And we could get very deep into this subject. But
I just kind of wanted to point out
Yeah.
that what a big deal it is to sign up. You give up
you give
some
up.
of the things that people from other countries are fighting to get here for, to serve this larger ideal. This is what a big deal it is, and I wanted to illustrate that.
That is a huge aspect of it. And, when we lose, you may lose those rights, but
Temporarily, at least.
it's a temporary thing. And what you gain for the rest of the world, the rest of the United States, that is what we are doing in there. So, making sure that you do have those rights and those freedoms.
So, veterans are more patriotic, obviously. What do you think the elements of that patriotism is? Like, what's the driving force? They love their country, but what is it they're defending when you talk about, I went in because this is so important, because this is so important? What are those so importance to them?
In many cases, they didn't go in because it was so important. It was something that they were looking at as the future. Back in Vietnam era, we had a lot of draftees, and they did not choose to go in.
So it was a little different.
It was a lot different back then. I went in because I wanted my continuing educational benefits that were offered afterwards. Plus, I wanted to have my time that I served my country over with, so when I did go back to school, I could continue on with my life and not have to worry about going back and doing that. You don't look at that now with the all voluntary military. So the patriotism, I think, it's what you feel that you are doing for your country and what you can continue to do afterwards when you get out to make this country better, to get rid of some of the divisiveness. It's so important. You can go far right, far left, mid-center. It doesn't really matter. We still need to work together as a country to maintain a strong country and keep our ideals at the surface of what is so important.
For me, those ideals would be things like freedom of speech, which we just pointed out the military temporarily gives up.
Absolutely.
Our ability to then defend ourselves, Second Amendment, whether that's personal defense or against tyrannical government. And I'm not just making that up. I would strongly encourage you folks to read about what they thought of the Second Amendment. There's a reason why it's placed where it is. Third Amendment's kind of interesting in that it's about quartering soldiers. It used to be that the British, who before we became our own country and ruled us, they could say, hey, you're going to take these soldiers, they're going to live in your house until we tell you different, and you had no choice. It's interesting to me how all of these things, they set this kind of foundation, and our freedom's based upon the individual. You have to almost give up your individuality for a time to be in the military.
And that's very true. You give them up, but for a better end.
Well put. I got to remember that. I got to remember how you just said that. You give them up, but for a better end. Almost as if there's something larger than yourself. And I think that's one of the elements that a lot of today's society has forgotten. They think that because their freedom is based upon the individual, that it's actually all about them. And they lose the idea that with the freedom comes the responsibility. We've collectively, in a lot of ways, forgotten about the responsibility. And I think veterans understand that responsibility.
I believe that as well, yes.
So if we're going to honor veterans, what's the best way to do it? What makes the big difference in your life when somebody, is it that they're come to an event? Is it that they thank you personally? Is it that they live a good life? What are you hoping for?
I don't look so much to be honored myself for what I did. I want to be honored for what we did collectively, what we have given the rest of the United States. We have given those rights. We have preserved those rights. So you do have the freedoms. You do have the first, second. You have all 14. And,
well, 27 amendments,
27.
minus 2 because they got rid of 2 of them. But
well, yes, and
super important up to 14. Well, women's rights to vote. I'd probably be in trouble if I didn't say that one was important.
You better say it. But looking as an individual, again, I'm not looking for the support from the community for what I myself did. That collectiveness and what we did to preserve what those rights that you do have. That is what is so important. And I think just remembering that these are the people that gave you those rights, not me individually, but the veterans as a whole, collectively. That's what we are looking for from the society, I believe.
So they need to participate, whether it's being part of a civil society or even just voting. We have abysmal percentages that vote.
And I can't understand why. And they're the ones that yell the loudest. You know, you don't have a right to yell and complain about anything if you yourself do not go in and do that voting.
Sadly, they technically have the right. It is very wrong that you would whine and complain, but then not do the work that goes with it.
You know, it's a right. It's something that you are afforded, but whether you do anything about that or not, that's on you.
Yeah. Well, that comes back to responsibility of the individual. We're going to go ahead and take our last break. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. So remember, we have stories of hope, and then as we get, there's the counter up there. As we get near the end, we need to go over the times, and I also want to mention the wall that's coming. Right. Let's go ahead and come back. And this is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. I am talking to John Cline from the Vietnam Veterans of America. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, it's not just this event that we've talked about over and over. Important event. Hope and I can be there. Most of the time I end up making an hour or two, and I can't stay. In other words, I don't get the free lunch. I just go for the honoring veterans. But that's all right. But you have another event. We have a wall coming. Can you tell us about that wall and what it is?
The wall that heals, we are responsible for bringing that. And again, that's our Chapter 933 of Vietnam Veterans of America. Many of our Vietnam era and Vietnam War veterans are getting to the point where they're not able to go back maybe on the honor flight and see the actual wall. So we are one of 30 locations in the United States this year where the wall that heals will be coming to Clovis, and that will be on October 9th through the 12th. That wall is a 3/4 scale size. There's an educational trailer that comes along with it. You will be able to visit that. Many of our veterans, as I say, can't make it back to Washington, D.C. to see the real one.
So the real one is the Veterans Memorial Wall.
That's correct.
So this is a like a
3/4 scale size. It's very large. It takes
a roving exhibit.
Yes, and it takes an entire football field to put this thing up. So
where's the room?
It's
at Veterans Memorial.
No, it's not at Veterans Memorial. It's a lot of people call it it's on the back of that sheet right there, and the park is we're losing time here.
That's all right.
There it is.
There it is. Finally got there. Well,
the name of the park, it's
I'm not seeing it, but I know it's here. David McDonald Park.
David McDonald Park.
I don't know where that one is.
And that's in Clovis.
I know, and I live in Clovis.
Well, that's something that you should know where that is.
Well, I make the city council meetings. Monday nights we were there till 10:30, but somehow I don't have time for the parks.
Well, that particular park is the same place where Mrs. Winkles is. Miss Winkles
Oh, okay.
is.
I just didn't know it was
So
called that.
that is the official name on it, rather than calling it Miss Winkles Park, is where the Wall That Heals is coming. That's the actual name of the park itself.
Well, there's plenty of space there.
And we have,
But if you don't know, Mrs. Winkle's Park works because everybody I think thinks of it that way.
Yeah. But that's so important that is coming. It can help bring closure to a lot of the Vietnam era veterans, as well as families. They can visit it. We have Gold Star families. The Gold Star families are the ones that have lost service personnel.
So Blue Star is
Blue Star is
family
serving.
in service.
Yes.
Gold Star is they've actually lost somebody in combat.
They have lost a person
Or-
in combat.
Is it combat or is it just
Generally speaking,
in service?
Yes, in service during a official war.
I mean, because let's face it, sometimes there's accidents and it might be that they're working on the mechanics of the tank that isn't necessarily in the field. It's back being repaired.
But it's in the support of the
Right.
people
That's
that
what I
are
meant,
over
support.
there. So yeah, we have over 58,000 names on that wall
Wow.
of people that have perished during that time. And
Well, getting back to your event again, March 29th.
March 29th at Clovis Veterans Memorial District, we are hosting the 50th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War. And that one will be from 10 o'clock until 1 o'clock at Clovis Veterans Memorial District. Please come. We'll have a huge map. It's a 30 by 50 foot map of Vietnam and the surrounding areas there. You can go ahead and sign your name as to where you served during that period of time, as well as Veteran Service Organization booths and places to sign up for VA hospital outreach centers and so on and so forth. Anything to support our veterans.
Why are you hopeful? Whether it's hopeful for veterans or hopeful for our country? Because you're still serving, so clearly you haven't given up.
I will never give up as long as I am able to go out and try to educate our youth, try to educate our older people as to why it's so important to continue to serve your country. It's your country, and what you make of it is the benefits that we will all reap from that.
So it's kind of like the Thomas Jefferson quote. I'm a strong believer in luck. The harder I work, the more of it I seem to have. What you put into it seems to matter.
It's interesting you bring up Thomas Jefferson. My wife had a relative that used to write letters to Thomas Jefferson, and when we have our President's Day event, that's something that the Association of the United States Army puts on, and she's always Jefferson, and she always says a quote for Jefferson.
Oh, cool. Now, I don't know that I would quite call him my favorite president, but he's top 5.
Yeah.
Definitely top 5. Well, we're winding down. We're down to just a couple minutes. Main reason you decided to join? Was there one thing, or was it like a feeling of the country? Was it that you were... Because, look, it's okay to work in our own self-interest. You mentioned that some soldiers, well, not necessarily soldiers, some... because I got to use the right term, and soldiers
Service
would not.
persons.
Service persons. Some of them went in, they were willing to serve, but they wanted the education at the other end. Well, part of why this country works is freedom of the individual. Well, of course we work for the good of our family or the good of ourselves.
Hopefully.
But that freedom that allows us to be at our best is why we are the most successful country that the world has ever seen. So why'd you go in?
I went in because I was raised that you have a duty to your country. to serve it in some manner, whether it be there's so many different ways that you can serve your country. You know, people think, well, I don't want to ever go to war or anything else. You can serve it positively in so many ways. And that, to me, that was something that I was expected to do, but I had no problems on not doing it because I saw what the benefits were for the rest of the country. And to serve that country that I live in became so important to me.
So kind of like Will Rogers that went around and rallied the country during World War II. I don't know if you've ever read about Will Rogers, but a home front hero. Well, I think that you are absolutely a beacon of light, and I appreciate this time. March 29th from 10 to 1. Get your free lunch. Come out to the Clovis Memorial Veterans District. I thank you for this time, John.
And I thank you for allowing us to tell our story and the importance of this country to remember your veterans, support your veterans, but teach the patriotism to the young because they are the next leaders of this great country.
Well, amen, brother. Thank you for this time. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town.